Welcome to Film Strip, and our reviews of the Alien movie franchise.
There is an explanation for this.
Featuring Nick.
Check it out. I am the ultimate badass.
And Jay.
This is so nuts. Listen to what you're saying.
Please note, these episodes will contain spoilers and in-depth discussion of the plots and characters of the films. All content used or discussed in this podcast are the property of their respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504c2, Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
I'm Nick.
And this is our review of Alien 3, The Assembly Cut, starring Sigourney Weaver, Charles S. Dutton, Charles Dance, and Lance Henriksen, directed by David Fincher, edited by Terry Rawlings and David Crowther. Now, we said last time why we were doing this, but we didn't really get into a lot of the pre-production stuff on Alien 3, the story of how it got here, and we wanted to save that for this discussion. And this will be a little bit different. We've never done a podcast where we basically had two cuts of the same film and are reviewing both of them. So this will be a little different for us here on Film Strip. But, Nick, let's talk about, one, why we wanted to do it into two pieces again, and then let's get into the story of the Alien 3 Assembly Cut.
I kind of want to touch on it a little bit because Alien 3 is such an interesting pre-production as far as the different scripts that were written. There was different directors attached to this before Fincher, and we talk about like other movies, they have had deleted scenes in them, but this one has over a half hour of just stuff completely cut from it. And when you add it in, it's almost like a completely different movie, or at least a different theme.
Well, it adds different elements to it.
Yeah.
What I would say. Here's the thing. I'd said last time I had never seen the Assembly Cut until this watching for the podcast here. And I got to say, the biggest thing, if I had to sum it up, is if you were curious about the motivations of these prisoners and what their story was and things like that, then the Assembly Cut is for you, because all of that makes so much more sense to me now, and I actually have characters to root for and know about there, where before they were, the African American man and the other one, and then a bunch of British bald guys. They were sort of random, and now in this one they have much more story. They definitely made a lot of changes in cutting this apart. But before we even get there, Nick, I said last time, it took them a long time and a lot of people to get to what ultimately hit the screen. So how did they even get here after Aliens?
I don't even really know how they didn't get there a lot sooner. I mean, when you think about when Aliens was released and when Alien 3 was released, I mean, that was a long time. Usually sequels are 3 years, 4 years at the most.
Generally, yeah. I mean, when I think about the distance between the first Alien and Aliens, it did take them 7 years or so to get between those, but that was because they made a conscious decision to wait on Cameron to finish Terminator before they did it. So that's different.
That, but also when you think about the 80s, I mean, 80s was a decade of sequels. I mean,
you got
all the Friday the 13th.
Well, yeah, there was a new Nightmare movie every year for 5 or 6 years. Yeah,
and that's what I kind of get by that. What I kind of mean by that is they had such a hit on their hands. You think they'd want to capitalize on that right away, but it took them a while. And I think part of the problem was, at least from what I've been hearing and reading and everything, was Fox wanted a sequel right away, but they just had really deep pockets and short arms. They didn't know what they want. They didn't know what they wanted, but they knew what they didn't want, and that was to spend a lot of money. There was a lot of talk about the alien finally coming to Earth. I mean, that was always the big theme of the movies, was this thing better not get to Earth. This thing better not get to Earth. What would happen to Hadley's Hope will happen to Earth and stuff. And that was always kind of the fear that everybody had, at least the character-wise in the movie. But Fox didn't want to go there because, it's going to cost a lot of money to do something on Earth compared to, doing it in a facility where you can just make hallways and the sets and stuff. But they didn't want to do that. But then another idea was possibly doing the Alien Homeworld, which that's going to cost a lot of money too, because Alien Homeworld, you're probably going to have thousands of aliens or, what have you, and they didn't want to spend money like that. So basically they wanted anything but that. And that was kind of where the problem arose. The first guy, I think, to do a script was by the name of William Gibson, who he wrote the script, and he basically envisioned being Aliens Part 2. He actually wrote Ripley out of the script by having this group of people find the Sulaco, and conveniently enough, Ripley was in a coma. So it was just basically kind of, like I said, Aliens 2. There's a lot of back and forth action between the Marines and the aliens, and I think the script had about 8 actual different battles that happened between the Marines and the aliens. And at the end of the movie, it was going to be a setup for Alien 4, which is going to take our heroes back to the alien homeworld.
Can I tell you why that would have not worked? And it's not because they write Ripley out. I'm actually going to – I didn't say much about this last time. I'm going to definitely bring it up this time about Ripley's role here and all of that. I want to tell you why that would not work. And I think Giler has said in a lot of his David Giler has said in a lot of the supplemental materials is that, you know, they got a lot of script ideas that were like a sequel to Aliens. And they didn't really want to do that because they felt like anytime they tried to match up to what that film had been, they were always going to fall short. And I think they would have. That'd have been like trying to do a sequel to Saving Private Ryan or something. I mean, there's just some things you can't follow the battle sequence of. It just doesn't work right. Think about, for instance, and we always pick on George Lucas on these podcasts, right? Think about the battle scenes in space of even something like Return of the Jedi. Not the favorite of most people in the thing, but the battle scene there at the end is pretty epic, right? Compared to the one that's in Phantom Menace. Well, the one in Phantom Menace looks better, but there's nothing to it. Nobody cares, right? It's a bunch of droids who, you know, there's no weight. There's no way you can add that same weight back in because the whole point of Aliens was that we take all this superior firepower and it still gets laid waste. Well, you can't recreate that. The rabbit's already out of that box. So that would have been a huge mistake to try to turn this into a war franchise. That seems bad, and I want to tell you what I think may have influenced that. In between Aliens and Alien 3, what came out, Nick? Predator. And what was Predator? An extraterrestrial that was an attack mode, right? And was always hunting, and it had the big fight with Arnold and all that. I have a feeling some of that was influencing that idea for that script. I can't prove it, but I just think that.
It's very possible. And, you know, it even came out after that was Predator 2, which came out before Alien 3. And, you know, we could even bring up that, you know, that movie wasn't successful. I mean, that was a critical bomb. That was a commercial bomb. No one really liked that movie. I don't like that movie at all. And
the movie's horrible. Yeah, there's a reason why. It's bad.
And that could also have influenced him, too, as, you know, copying the same thing doesn't necessarily always work. And I think the redo kind of what Cameron did, I mean, audiences aren't stupid, and they're going to realize what's going to happen. I mean, the reason Aliens was so great was you took what the audience was expecting, and that was something being like Alien, and then turning into something like Aliens, you know, turning a horror into an action combat. They didn't know what to expect as that was happening. Now to do an action combat and then go do another action combat movie, you're going to it's going to follow the same rules. You know, you're going to get a group of guys, you know, they're all going to have different personalities and stuff, and then they're going to slowly get picked off one by one in big battles. It's going to be the same old stuff. And yeah, I mean, you might be able to do it at a grander scale, but it's going to get basically like how I brought up those 80s horror movies. They all felt the same, and this is just going to feel more of the same. So I think they were right to kind of maybe go back and, like, you know, let's try something just a little bit different.
I think what they wanted to do is to get back to what Ridley Scott had done, was do something that was more of a thriller horror kind of film, and to do something that maybe the pace was a little slower, the cast was a little smaller. I mean, I could see wanting to go back and revisit that, and that actually makes some sense. The trick to formula is it can work for you, you know, if you do it right. I mean, say what you will about some of the Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street sequels. Those are popular because people like the formula and it works. I always feel like Alien was supposed to be, as a series, was a higher brow than some of that stuff. And I find it interesting that they say all this stuff about how they wanted to do something different, but yet they really tried to recreate the mood and atmosphere of Ridley Scott's Alien, and they tried to hit all the beats that Cameron had. I think I brought up last time when we were talking about Alien 3 that I felt like we were in Ridley's world, but moving at Cameron's pace with Fincher's sort of cynical sensibility. Because there's so many times in the film where I'm like, okay, now's the time where we got to hit the beat where somebody dies and you don't expect it. And now here's where the robot comes in. And then here's where the thing happens. I mean, that happened. And they still do that. It's not as evident in the assembly cut because of everything they add back in, and the scenes are much longer and stuff, and we get into that. But they still fall into the formula. But I find it funny that they didn't want to repeat the combat movie, which I agree was a bad idea, but they want to try to get back to the horror movie, but they can't get anybody that knows anything about horror movies to write the dang thing.
William Gibson, I'm not really familiar with his work, but just after reading his script, I mean, I can see why they didn't want to do it. I mean, besides being just Aliens Part 2, it was It was more of the same, and I agree. I mean, almost let's make the franchise go full circle, as they would say. Let's kind of bring it back to its roots. I mean, we even see kind of now with like the new Batman movie that's coming out, how they're kind of bringing up the old, Ra's al Ghul type feeling. At least from everything I'm reading from behind the scenes, kind of bringing that franchise full circle. So I could kind of see them wanting to do almost the same type of thing here. But even before we got to that, then a guy by the name of Eric Red wrote the next script for Fox, and if anybody's ever saw the movie Akira, it is basically a ripoff of that. We open up the story with this group of people finding the Sulaco, and Ripley, Newt, and Hicks have all basically turned into cocoons themselves, or cocooned eggs, or however you want to say it. And face huggers break out and go on these guys, and it just gets really bizarre. I choose to kind of try to forget most of the script. All I remember really is that it ends with the ship that they're on, this family that's on the ship, turning into an alien itself. I mean, you actually have a full ship like the size of the Sulaco turning into an alien. It's just off the wall ridiculous.
How in the world, that guy, whoever got paid for that? I hope they didn't give out a lot of dough for that. But, oh my God.
I hope not. But actually, before that though, is Fox actually hired Rennie Harlan.
Yeah, as a director, I knew that.
To direct that, and he read the script and walked out on the project, and he wanted to do Die Hard 2.
But I'm going to tell you something. People bang on Rennie Harlan. I'm going to tell you, he was wise to know that was a bad idea. That he had just done Nightmare on Elm Street, that gotten him in the Nightmare. I think he did Nightmare 4. That got him in the door with American audiences, and I mean, he was a big deal. As bad as the Die Hard 2 script is, and it's got its problems. That's light years above a ship turning into an alien. That would have been ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, if my memory serves me correct, I mean, there's even like alien human hybrids, which we're probably going to talk about next week. And then there's even alien mosquitoes, alien cattle, alien dogs, alien chickens.
Well, we almost
ridiculous.
Get alien cattle here. I mean, that held around, oddly enough. So.
But these ones, though, I mean, it's not as far as just, turning from, walking on 2 legs to walking on 4 legs. I mean, they actually took on their actual physical characteristics. I mean, if you were like me growing up, you probably might have had like the alien toy line that came out in the early 90s. How like you had like the bull alien, the mantis alien, and how they actually looked more like the animal than the H.R. Geiger alien. And that was kind of what he was getting at with that. Is it was just ridiculous. But then what came next was actually David Twohy, who you might know from the Riddick movies. He also did he did a movie with Charlie Sheen. It's called The Arrival. I
actually like The Arrival. I'm one of the few people that I know likes that. I think that's a smart little sci-fi film. We may have to do that one someday. But yeah, I like him. So.
Yeah, I like David Twohy a lot too. I love Pitch Black. I think that's a great alien type, movie with the nice little switch at the end and everything. Less we talk about the Chronicles of Riddick, the better. But the first Pitch Black was really good. But his script brought in the prison planet type setting, and it was a decent script and stuff, but it also kind of got a little bit off the walls with alien clones, and there was like a Siamese twin alien where they were actually like connected together.
Oh and God. Was Ripley in that one, or when did she come back in the scripts? I want to know.
She was in this. Was she in the script? God, there's so many Alien 3 scripts, but yeah. I don't think she was in the script.
Okay.
I think that was the big thing, is that all these scripts that they had, the Twohy script, the Red script, the Gibson script, none of them had Ripley in it. The only one that really did have Ripley in it was Gibson's, and she was in a coma. That way they could write her out of the story, because she was on the big thing about no guns and everything, and we brought up how she wanted to have sex with an alien, she wanted to die, and she didn't want guns, and Fox was just kind of weird about bringing her back, and she didn't really want to come back either. I think she thought the story was done as far as Ripley's story.
She came back twice more, so clearly that check convinced her otherwise.
Well, isn't it what it's all about in the end? It's all about the money and the producer's credit, because you've actually noticed on Alien 3 she does have a producer's credit.
Yeah, she's co-producer in this thing. Yeah, so yep. I noticed that. So they definitely had to pay Sigourney to get her back in. But then that brings us to Vincent Ward, right?
Yep, and he was actually hired as the director. And he told them, because Fox actually, they didn't mind Twohy's script. They actually kind of wanted to tweak it and take it from there. But Vincent Ward said no. He said he wanted to write a new script. He was not going to direct Twohy's script. And that's when he wrote the Wooden Planet script, which I just recently read, and it's an interesting script to say the least. It's not bad. It's how it starts off. It starts off almost exactly like Alien 3, with their escape pods exiting out of the Sulaco through the EVV, and instead of crashing onto a prison planet, they crash onto a wooden planet that's run by monks. And after, you gotta go with it. It is a ridiculous concept. I mean, this wooden planet actually has an atmosphere. The opening scene is actually a guy reaching his hand into outer space through the atmosphere to bring it back and showing, oh, he's just on the edge of the spaceship. I mean, it's
hold on. Egg don't open. I mean, I can't even imagine that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's and what happens though is Ripley's spaceship crash lands into their, I don't know, little lake they have. Think of it like it's a biodome. It's like a biodome.
now I have Pauly Shore in my head.
No, not that. If it would have had Pauly Shore in it, though, that might have been pretty interesting.
that would have been a really interesting. Well, I'm surprised he's not in one of the Alien versus Predator films. So that's a couple weeks away. But
yeah. But
well, I'm getting you biodome. I got you.
Yep. So what happens is it crash lands into this lake, and it turns out Newt had the alien inside of her, and the alien actually escapes through her. No, I'm sorry. I'll take that back. The alien was actually inside Hicks, and the alien escapes. And then it turns out the whole big plot twist at the end was there was an alien also inside of Newt, but when it went underneath the water, it actually went out of Newt's mouth and into Ripley's mouth and I don't know how you'd call it, resettled itself in her lungs because it needed to grow some more and stuff. And there's some cool scenes in here. I mean, there's stuff with it's supposed to be like a monastery, real old style living, almost kind of like The Village in a way, how they were kind of living in the past. This is what these monks wanted to do. They wanted to live in the past. And there's a scene where this guy's sitting on like a John type thing, and the alien is actually living like crap. And this guy's, doing his business, and the alien actually reaches up and grabs him and pulls him down into it. And I see that. I mean, that would actually be maybe a cool scene to see on screen and stuff. But the script starts getting a little bit more off the walls, if you can believe it, with the alien taking on like a chameleon type behavior where it can make itself look like wood, and it can make it, because the whole plot is that the aliens and the other Aliens movies kind of looked more mechanical in nature because they were on they were in metal areas, they were in metal corridors, so they took on those shapes. And because this one's in wood areas, it starts taking on wood characteristics. And
I think that would enter in the thing that killed the rest of these money, that we're going to spend the money on that at all.
But it goes on the script with the prisoners, or not the prisoners, the monks wanting to kill the alien, and they set fire to this big cornfield where they grow all their corn and wheat because the alien's living in there, and they try to kill it that way. They end up killing all themselves by doing it. I mean, very much like Alien 3 with how they're trying to burn it out.
That sounds like Children of the Corn. So yeah. He who walks behind the rose is also an alien.
But you can see how when it was later rewritten, the script was actually the basis for Alien 3. You can kind of see little elements that they obviously wrote around and kind of changed it to a prison setting, like the fire trying to get the alien out. I mean, that's just the same thing in Alien 3.
Vincent Ward still gets story credit. That's right. So, yeah.
And then Ripley being pregnant with the aliens, the huge thing in it. And later in this movie, or in the script, I keep calling it movie, the script, Ripley's like in the center of this planet, and she's down there with another guy who's kind of like the Charles Dance character, kind of like the doctor type guy. And the alien's trying to get at him, and the alien is almost taking on like human characteristics now, where it's actually like taunting Ripley like through doors, and like one of the monks on there actually turns out to be a synthetic. I mean, they gotta always have that in the movie where someone's a robot that they don't really realize at first, and the alien's like picking up its head and trying to make it look like it's talking, like it's all this taunting of Ripley. And they end up killing the alien in the same way, but instead of it being getting it full of lead and then putting water on it, there's like a glassworks thing in the this wooden planet that they cover it with glass, and then they sprinkle water on it and it makes it explode. Two other big elements in the script. One is that the alien can somehow transfer to another body if you kiss the person. So at the end of the movie, when Ripley wants to sacrifice herself, the Charles Dance type character basically kisses her, knowing that he's going to take the alien embryo into him, and he ends up walking into the fire that the monks set earlier, killing himself, and Ripley gets in the escape pod, which now can take off out of the planet, mind you, and takes her chance trying to get picked up. And the other thing that's kind of interesting in the script was when Ripley is first interrogated by the monks, by the head monk, she's talking about Earth, and he basically says that, Earth is destroyed, Earth is gone, that they left Earth 200 years ago, and that Ripley and Newt and Hicks were floating in space for hundreds of years. Kind of adding onto that, 57-year element of aliens. Now they're saying she was out in space for 200 years. But in the end, it goes into them saying that, no, it hasn't been really 200 years, that this guy made that up, that Earth was being destroyed, and he made up that 200 years to Ripley so she wouldn't try to contact Earth. Yeah, I mean, it's maybe M. Night Shyamalan copied that. I mean, I wouldn't put a pat that.
Well, can I say this? Some of that is okay, and I know that because it comes into the movie that we get, because Vincent Ward's story is the outline of this. But like the ending, all those ending elements, those would have been awful. That would have been horrible. And
the whole thing with the alien being able to, and there was two endings to it. One of them was Ripley walking into the fire, and then the other one was the other prisoner keep on saying prisoner, the other monk walking into fire. But the whole thing with the alien being able to come out of the mouth and go into another mouth and stuff, that was kind of stupid. But especially with kissing and stuff, like he goes and kisses her knowing that the alien's going to go into his throat. It's like,
that's kind of weak.
Yeah, but that was a script they actually decided to go with. And
so, and we heard that multiple times. Fincher shot the film not having a finished script. That may have been where they were going at one point. He had no idea. So,
yeah, and you can see with the set designs too. I mean, a lot of that had a lot of Christian type elements to it with the way it looked, and especially in the assembly cut, which we'll get into in a minute, was. Yeah. You even see in the beginning of that, you see a cross out there. It's not really a cross, but it's like two pieces of debris making a cross in the sun. And there's so much Christian mythology and elements into it.
The whole point, and I think that's the thing. I said earlier that the biggest thing that gets cut out of the assembly cut versus the theatrical is the fleshing out of the prisoners and who they were and stuff like that. And I'm going to go ahead and say this now. I'll play devil's advocate for just a minute, and I can see why the studio cut all of that. Even though it chops the movie up and it does feel like in the second act we just transition and all of a sudden stuff happens, and we don't know why. Because the movie, if the assembly cut, if you watch it as that, there's an equal balance of character time for Ripley and the prisoners, particularly Charles Dutton's character. You got a lot more of him. You understand him a lot better. He makes a lot more sense with all his little pontificating and his speeches and all this stuff. You actually want to start rooting for him a little bit. You get to know those prisoners more. And I think Fox looked at this, and when they had when they had Sigourney Weaver back on board, they said, no, this is Sigourney's thing. We can't let anybody overshadow her. And she does a good job with what they've got. I will still say Sigourney Weaver does a good job with what she's given. But I think that's why they made these decisions to cut it loose. And the whole point is, this whole spiritual under theme is that when you are at the lowest point you can possibly get at, you find out what you're really made of and what really matters. And what I feel like Fincher is trying to say is that what really matters is being willing to sacrifice yourself and others for the greater good if that's necessary. And that's sort of the ultimate in spirituality, and that's part of Christianity and a number of other religions, So I think that's the whole theme, and all that got gutted in the theatrical version. So what comes out in the theatrical version is you have this woman who's at her wit's end because she's infected with an alien, the thing that she can't get away from, right? I mean, that's how it plays. But that's the way it looks like to me, and that's sort of what I get. That's my overall feeling about the assembly cut, is that it's much more a spiritual, psychological film than the theatrical cut.
Oh, definitely. I definitely agree. There's even elements later in the movie with the prisoners and how they see the alien, or at least a few of the prisoners see the alien. It's not a monster, but some of them believe it's some type of religious symbol in itself, and
they think it's the end of times come to be. That's so cryptic, particularly in Christianity, as to how that will work.
It's the beast. It's the beast.
Exactly. That could be. Yeah. Why not? Why couldn't it be? It seems to operate like the beast that they've read about in Revelation and other things. So, yeah, I could see how they would go there with that. And I kind of tell you, that was good. I liked that. All that stuff makes so much more sense. And, Nick, I think the way we can get through this one, we can't really do a plot summary again because it's the same movie. I mean, what we should do is just hit some of the bigger changes that were made and talk about them as they occur in the film and sort of what scenes they bookend and stuff. And that's how we'll kind of go through this one. I will tell you, folks, if you haven't seen the assembly cut of Alien 3, you really need to watch it if you have any plans of following the discussion much, because again, having never seen it before, if I was trying to read all this, I wouldn't be able to picture it. But when you see it, it makes so much more sense.
And I also want to point out too that there is 2 different versions of the assembly cut. Nothing really with what they added in content, but the new Blu-ray that came out for the Alien set, they actually went back and redid the ADR for the new scenes.
Yeah.
If you watch the quadrilogy version, the DVD, you'll notice that when the new scenes come in, that the audio is a little bit off because this is older stuff that they reinserted. And it was never had proper audio, mixing or.
Yeah.
So what they did was when they went and did the Blu-ray release, they actually had a lot of the actors come back in and re-record that stuff. So it sounds a lot crisper. It makes the movie flow a lot better. It doesn't take you out.
I watched the quadrilogy DVD, watching the assembly cut, and they put subtitles in it, and you can follow it. It's not bad, but there's definitely a drop in quality. Like what you hear is what was live audio on the set because they've got fans blowing and all this other stuff, and you don't hear the crispness of the vocal track recorded or re-recorded. So I would have loved to. Someday I'll have to join the Blu-ray revolution, Nick, and get a copy of that and watch it. But I will say you can watch the DVD of it still, and you can tell a difference. You can still follow it.
Oh yeah, definitely. It doesn't take you out of the movie at all. Especially, I mean, if you're an Alien fan and everything, it's fine. But if you're gonna pick, if you got Blu-ray, definitely check it out. It's good. It's really impressive that they went back and did that. It shows how much Fox actually, with all of Fox's shortcomings, how much they actually care for the series.
They will protect their series on the long game. They sometimes will force stuff into theaters, but their DVD releases are almost always pretty robust, even for films that aren't very good. I mean, the Alien vs. Predator Requiem disc that I have, and we'll talk about that in a couple weeks, is...
You own it?
Oh, I actually own it, yes. I paid actual dollars for it. There's a ton of stuff on it, and I've watched it all. So we'll get back to that in another day. But I think we got to start with the opening here, Nick, because that's one of the biggest changes. The whole opening, not so much what happens in the spacecraft, all that's still basically the same, but how the EEV crashes and how the prisoners come upon the thing. I mean, we get this whole sweeping shot of the beach and the old refinery stuff, and you get Clemens walking in there. I mean, there's a lot of different stuff that happens in the way they discover the bodies. And Ripley is not a part of the EEV. She's been thrown from it.
Yeah, actually, the first thing we see, first character we see is Charles Dance's character. And he's standing there almost like a monk. He's got like the the overcoat on, and he's got his hands just kind of settled on top of each other, and he's looking out there, and he sees the EEV out in the water. And then as he investigates further, he finds Ripley just covered in mud and everything on the shore.
Yeah, and covered in those lice bugs and all that stuff. It's really gross seeing, and I think that's a dummy. I don't believe that's Sigourney Weaver, actually. It's a pretty good looking facsimile of her. But I like that. Can I tell you, I bought that a lot more than they just happened upon it, and all of a sudden they're these people, and boom, we're back in the lab. Because it still all works out the same way. He carries her back in and yells at these prisoners to go get the oxygen out there. There could be more. And I like how all that plays out better, because you don't know these people are prisoners. We know that because we've seen it. But if you didn't know that, you'd think these are just like factory workers or something.
Yep.
I like how all that plays out. And then that's another change in things is the facehugger doesn't grab a hold of a dog, it gets one of the oxen, which it will later emerge from.
Yeah, because actually this next scene that we get is them showing them how they got the EEV out of the water, which was actually with oxen, and they're pulling the EEV out, and you see the oxen and everything like that, and then they look inside the EEV, and you see the wreckage in there. You see that Hicks has been destroyed. You actually get a better view of him. You see his body just mangled and everything, and they pull it inside. It's actually kind of a cool scene with them pulling it inside with the oxen.
It's very cool. They pull it into basically where they leave it in that junk pile. And I like that the prison warden, Andrews, is typing messages to the company telling you everything that the scroll told you in the theatrical cut. You know, people dead, this happening. And he's got all this stuff going, and they automatically know a lot of information, like one survivor, Lieutenant Ripley, here's her company number, dead Corporal Hicks, dead 10-year-old girl, you know, and I love how they throw all that in there. And that gave Andrews something to do. I'm like, yes, that would be what he did. He's the head guy in charge. He needed to have that active role, and I kind of liked that.
Yeah, and it makes sense later too when he and Ripley are having an argument, and it's showing that you know he's been in contact with them the whole time, because you realize that he is kind of a company man.
Yeah, totally. And I mean that's why it makes so much more sense that would work.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
I love how the next scene in the theatrical is that he starts talking and says, "This is rumor control. Here are the facts." But in this cut, it starts off with everybody walks in and he goes, "Mr. Dillon," and Charles S. Dutton leads a prayer, and they all amen together, and then he starts the whole bit. And I like that because that builds camaraderie among everybody. They may be prisoners, but they all kind of have the run of the place together, right? And I like the fact that even though he's a company man, he respects the fact that these guys have adopted this religion and they're going to go with it and whatever. And if it keeps them at bay, it keeps them at bay, right?
Mm-hmm. And I also like too that they're adding more of a religious tone to the whole movie with Dillon giving a prayer for the people that died.
Yeah. When he gives that speech at the burial later on, that bookends real well with the language he's using in the prayer. It makes a lot more sense. And I think Charles Dance even goes on to explain to Ripley, because he says it in the theatrical, but it doesn't make any sense there when he describes the sect of Christianity they've adopted. It makes a lot more sense. You listen to the way he prays and what he's saying and things like that. And it's, I don't know, that scene just works better. But again, if they're going to cut all the religious undertone, I get why it just goes straight to the warden there, and you know who he is in the theatrical just by his actions. But this makes it gives a lot more robust feeling to the characters.
And then another change that comes up after that is we get a little short scene. This is after Ripley has been awoken, and she finds out about Newt and Hicks. But she actually has some talk with Clemens about what the facility is, giving a little bit more light on it. And he talks about how it was a 1,000-convict facility at a time, and now it's been reduced to a 25-man custodial staff, and that they keep the place on pilot light, is what he says. And she asks, what does pilot light mean? And he goes, toxic dump. The prisoners forge lead shields to seal off any potential leaks in the shaft. So basically they're telling them what they do there. They use that lead foundry. It's in the original theatrical cut, it sounds like they'd never used that thing before, but no, they use that thing. That's their job, is to use that lead shaft, and they create shields so the place doesn't let toxic stuff out into the planet. I mean, why they care about the planet, I don't know, but at least it makes a little bit more sense.
This is one of those things that would have been better to reinsert, even if you're going to cut all the spiritual stuff out of the theatrical cut, because then it doesn't seem like out of the blue that all these guys know how to work that foundry. Because it does come off in the theatrical cut like, how do they know how to do this? I guess they just know how to do it. But when you hear him saying, oh, no, they've done this and they built that, and you get how they would know their way around those tunnels and how they know how to shut it all off real quick and stuff. I mean, they work in the place.
Yeah, definitely. And then after that, then, it's the same movie up until we get up to the scene with the autopsy. They do add a little bit more into the autopsy. I don't know if you caught that or not, but
I did. God, that still gets to me.
They actually, instead of just showing kind of like hints and little views of it, you still get all that, but you also get almost like a clear shot of her with a plastic wrap over her body with I don't know the medical term for it, but what goes into your sternum and it separates your rib cage. And
yeah, that was that was right out of a Saw movie or something, man. I mean, I thought, God, but again, I get, like I said before, I think Fincher's trying to throw us into an uncomfortable place. And it's one thing, it's uncomfortable to have a prepubescent girl operated on basically topless. Okay. And it's another thing to go that dark and deep where they cut her open, they break her chest open, all that stuff. I mean, they show you the internal organs, all that. It's really unsettling. And again, it just creeps me out. But I think that's the point. It's supposed to, and it does. It does a really good job of that.
Yeah, and the edit scenes are brutal. And
they are. They're Ugh, yeah.
And from reports, that's not even it. I mean, they cut that down a lot. And if we would get the true assembly cut with everything added back in, I think it would probably almost be unwatchable from everything I've heard.
There's no way you could. Everything I've heard about, there's no way you could watch that thing. It's not going to happen. So.
And they actually did show it to people when they were doing test screenings for the movie. They had that whole thing inserted, and that was it wasn't even that Newt was dead. The number one complaint that the people had walking out of it was the autopsy scene was too much. And
yeah, exactly. So the next thing is you get two of the prisoners, and one we don't know anything about Frank. We didn't know him, but we know Murphy because he's the one that gets thrown in the fan blade in a little while. But to get these guys talking, and they're bringing in a dead ox. You know, they're like, well, it just keeled over all of a sudden, and they talk about how it's. Well, it's kind of in the prime of its life. This is sort of weird that it died, but oh well, you know, and they're stringing it up and they say, yeah, we'll wash it off and skin it later. And, you know, they use it for meat, obviously, right? And they're having this whole back and forth, and they talk about, you know, what they'd do if they ever got Ripley alone. And I thought, well, if they're setting that up because I guess Frank is one of the guys that attempts the sexual assault on her later, then I guess that gives a little background to it. But I still think that whole scene is wrong and plays wrong and shouldn't even be in the film. But they have that. But I think the most important thing here is we all know as the Alien fans, well, clearly this is weird, but this is something new. The alien's never ejected itself from a dead carcass before. It's always been a living host, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, like, is the ox really dead or is it just comatose or what? Because what is even neater is Murphy picks up this thing and says, hey, what's this? And it's this huge face hugger. And it's bigger than most of the ones we've seen before. But we know what it is, but they don't.
Yep. It's actually, they refer to it as on set as the Queen face hugger. And apparently how the Queen facehugger worked is it dislodged itself from the Queen. The Queen, knowing that, you know, her nest was destroyed or whatever, she had a Queen facehugger always with her, and that was released on the ship. And it basically it can lay 2 eggs. It can lay one that's going to be the Queen embryo, and then one for a warrior alien.
Okay, so that I was going to ask then. So is this isn't the one that impregnates the ox, but it is what you're saying.
Yep, it's the one that impregnates the ox. It would impregnate Ripley, or if you go by what the comic says, the comic actually says that Ripley wasn't impregnated at first. It was actually Newt, and that when they crashed into the water, the alien escaped Newt's and went into Ripley's, which kind of brings us back to the whole thing I don't like about the Ward script with the alien being able to jump from body to body, and that just I think it kind of defeats a lot of the purpose of being pregnant with the alien. I think it just seems kind of trivial that the thing's just keeping warm inside of you instead of actually, you know, living off you, which I think is much more disgusting. You know?
Well, it's much more horrific if that's the case, you know. And plus, I think that gives it away too early. I mean, I know once you see the movie, the cat's out of the bag that Ripley's got an alien in her, but that's half the suspense is you don't know she's infected. You think Newt is, and maybe, you know, now you see the other alien run around, you think, well, okay, no, it wasn't Ripley, but because she doesn't have any of the scarring and she's just beat up from a crash, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's that leaves that almost kills too much of the suspense. I'm glad they cut a lot of the explanation of that though too, because there's no way any of these guys would have known that about the facehugger, you know.
Well, they didn't say it in the movie. This is all just stuff that I picked up from the production diaries, the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, there's no way to explain it. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's nobody that can come in and go, oh, that was the Queen face hugger, because they don't even know what the face huggers are anyway.
Yeah, they put all this thought into it, and I think that's what they realized was, well, it makes sense a little bit from, you know, the standpoint we're going at with it, but there's really no way to give exposition for it, and
right.
That's why they dropped it. And is it 2 face huggers, 3 face huggers, 1 face hugger, eggs on the ship? That's what they threw in, which I don't know. If whatever one you like better is up to you, but I like the idea of the Queen facehugger, but it's, again, you know, how do you explain it? I mean, I guess you probably could have had Bishop doing a little bit of exposition about it, but how would he even know?
Exactly. Yeah, he wouldn't have known that either at that point. I'm surprised this has never come up in one of the later films, though. I guess we can talk about that when we get around to those, but I'm surprised they never went back to that idea. The burster scene is basically the same, except for the long shot. They finally show the gutted out ox thing, and then you have the rod puppeted effect of the dog alien, if you will, and running down the hall. And I did get to see the Tippett Greyhound dog that they put up in the alien gear run.
Oh, wasn't that terrible?
I thought I said they should have filmed that. That's precious. So I guess that is, Surprised you don't have your dog like done up like that at Halloween or something. But yeah, that was an awful looking effect. Almost as bad as the composite work of the rod puppet on top of this. So we were on the verge of stuff. They weren't spending money on this movie. Now, who knows how much they spent before they even got it out, even got to this point. I mean, the budget on it's $50 million. I'm willing to say at least half of that happened before they ever shot an inch of film. So
yeah,
just on all the
a lot of this stuff was done on cheap, and I like the close-ups of the rod puppet. I think it looks pretty cool when they're close-ups of it, but when they show it running down the hallway, my God, does that look bad? I mean, it's so blatantly bad. It's like they almost, even when it's standing up. I mean, H.R. Geiger, he called it the Bambi zombie. I mean, it does kind of have that where its legs are a little bit wobbly and everything, and I'm kind of like, you look at like the first alien chestburster we saw in the first movie, that thing just, it took off, it adapted right away. This one almost kind of comes off a little pathetic in the beginning, it can barely stand and stuff. It's kind of like, it doesn't seem like the ultimate survivor of what we've known of the alien.
Yeah. And the next piece goes to the mess hall, and but in the theatrical, Ripley just walks up to Dylan, and he's the whole, I'm a raper and murderist of women, raper and murderist, God. I'm a rapist and murderer of women, you don't want to know me, lady, and there's no setup to that. In this one, there's a lot more of him talking to his guys, and he can tell they're screwed up by the fact that she's there. And they don't know how to handle that, and they can't stand this Gallic guy because he smells bad and he's just crazy, and they can't take him, and he is arguing, going, nope, you're gonna tolerate him, and all that. And I liked that because it set up the dynamic with the prisoners. You understand why these guys look to Dylan now, and how much, I guess for lack of a better saying it, like pastoral control he has with them.
He's almost kind of coming off like a foreman,
Yeah.
The foreman has bosses, but the foreman's the guy who relates to the workers, and because he was a worker or whatever, what have you. But he's telling these guys, you got to work with this guy. You might not like the guy, you might hate the guy, but it ain't up to you. You're working with this guy, so man up and deal with it. And then they're showing closes up a Gullik, and you can just tell the guy's a messed up dude. Oh. He's about 5 cans short of a 6-pack. I mean, he's not all there, but
yeah, he's definitely wacky, that's for sure. So.
And that's when you look at the theatrical version, they almost cut Gullik out completely, his arc, if you will. And I like it. I love actually, getting to know these characters a little bit more, because they go from just being bald-headed British guys to, all right, I'm starting to make them out a little bit. Yeah, that guy's a little bit crazy. Then you got these other two guys who look like they're kind of like a Parker and Parker and Brett type relationship, and it's almost kind of bringing back stuff a little bit.
Exactly. You get more of them. There's some reason for them. That's the thing that's missing in the theatrical cut. You just have to accept that they are, like Ripley describes them, prisoners who find God at the end of space. That's all you know about them in the theatrical. In this, you get to see all of that, and you get to see their work habits. And I think you described it really well. The warden and Mr. Aaron kind of run things, even though everybody hates Aaron, and they still play that joke with his IQ and all that, which is funny. But Charles Dutton is the foreman. He's sort of the leader of the prisoners. And as long as the warden knows, if I got to get anything done, I got to go through Dylan. And that he'll get them in line. And that makes a lot more sense later, even when they do that horrible rape scene thing, when he comes in and starts busting their chops, you get that that's why he would have to do that. That every now and then I got to re-educate some of the brothers. Like that comes off really kind of lame in the theatrical of this. It makes a lot more sense.
It's coming off like he's the one that's, he's going to take the fall for these guys if they screw up. He's the one that has to report to Andrews. He's got to be the one that's reporting them. He's in charge of them, and he's going to take the fall. And you just see it that he's the foreman of the guys. He's going to be there to help them out, and he's going to be there to tear them down when it needs to be. And I personally, I really am enjoying everything that's been added so far. I mean, besides the oxen thing, which was kind of stupid, I wish they would have kept the dog part in, but all these little character interactions are really working for me. It's already the first half hour into the movie. I'm already sensing this movie's a lot better.
Oh, it's so much better setup. Now, the thing is, I've already had to still accept things that I don't like. The fact that Newton Hicks are dead, and that Ripley's in this situation again, and I'm having the whole John McClane, how many times can the same stuff happen to the same guy? I'm feeling a little bit of that. But it's such a different environment, and it's giving me people to play with here that are unique. I mean, I could see how if they didn't have Sigourney Weaver on board here, and somehow the alien got on this prison planet, would almost like that movie. I don't know that it would be as good because I think Sigourney Weaver's performance does a lot with all of this, but I think that movie would work in a lot of ways if they gave me enough background on these guys and maybe somebody else from the previous film or something involved in it. I don't know. This is a side thought, but I'm going with it a lot more too. I found myself realizing this was longer and I could feel it getting longer, but I wasn't minding it as much as I thought I would. Like I really went into this going 2 hours and 24 minutes of this. I don't know. And because the other one, like it moves fast enough that I'm like, well, okay. I liked it more than you did because you disavow its existence, but
Hyper Sleep Dream.
Yeah, I would go with it, but I can go with Alien 3, the theatrical, but this one is definitely a longer haul, but I'm liking it so far too. Part of that may have been that it was new to me, but I also think it was genuine. I really like what I was seeing. What I don't like is that I think they still go with this whole Clemens and Ripley relationship, and I still feel like too much of this is perfunctory and doesn't work.
Yeah, I could see that, but I don't know. I kind of like seeing, because this is before Ripley even knows about the alien, and it's almost kind of nice to see her. Her element to us is being attacked by an alien, being always under threat, always being fearing of this stuff. Yeah, she just lost Newton Hicks, but she's a different type of Ripley right now, and it's almost kind of nice to see her be different for once. Even if it's only going to be for 15 minutes, it's just, I don't know. I just think it's a little bit nice,
It's something for her to do it's something we haven't seen her do, but I still just have a hard time. And I think part of it is I like Charles Dance and I like his character and I like Ripley and I like what Sigourney Weaver does with her, but I don't feel the connection with them together other than besides the two wardens, that's the only other sane one she could possibly be with. And he's got his own dark past. I don't know. I think that's a personal quip for me. I just didn't buy the love story angle. If that's what they're trying, I don't even know if it's a love story, just the human touch story of it. I still don't go with it, but they give us more of it. So it makes it works better in the assembly cut, but it's still not something I really latch on to very much.
Well, I like it though that we get Clemens asking her more about why do we have to, you got to tell me why do we cremate those bodies? Because
right.
He put himself on the line with that because he's not really even a prisoner himself. I mean, he is a prisoner, but he's the doctor there. I mean, he's higher up. He's kind of one of the top 3 guys there. I mean, Andrews and Aaron are the only ones that are above him, but he kind of put his ass on the line for her by doing this because that's not what the company wanted. They wanted them on ice. The company wants the bodies.
Right.
And he goes out of his way to do it. And it's I think it's a good plot element to see that he's sitting there just kind of asking her and he goes, why did we do that? You owe me an explanation of this. And she just kind of still kind of blows him off, but she tells him that she had a bad hypersleep dream. And that was the reason why. I just, it's a little bit of a weak explanation on her part, but I just kind of like it that it's just not dropped, that there's a little bit more to it.
Yeah. Yeah. The scene with Clemens and Andrews is a little bit longer too. There feels like there's a couple of extra beats in there, and I did like that because the animosity between those two felt a little rushed in the theatrical, and this one you get a little bit more of why. You clearly, Clemens is somebody with a past, but there's also other reasons. He's willing to, I think he actually has respect for Dylan and these other prisoners and things like that, and the fact that they've decided to accept God and all that. And I don't think Andrews, he's just like, whatever keeps him happy, I don't care. He's just doing a job. And I felt like Clemens actually respected them for what they had decided to do with themselves, even though they are just prisoners.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's one of them too. I mean, he's a prisoner too, and he's obviously going to relate more than the guy who's the company guy doing his job there and stuff. And I think he wants them to show a little bit more respect to the prisoners, and being like, yeah, these guys are murder and rapists, but that's kind of behind them. That's They found God, if have you.
But then again, it's people. Not because we forced that stupid rape scene back into this thing. So that's he's wrong in that case. But I don't know that to me though. Those are a couple of things that are a little bit more minor, but it's really in the middle that things start to get heavy again. After the alien kills Boggs and Gollett looks up at the alien and we see that whole, I called it out when it sneered at him and I still hate that or whatever. It's it looks different. Golic envisions the creature as something different. He starts to attach to it as like you've said. He thinks it's like the coming of the beast, and so because of what he believes now and everything, he's ready for the second coming.
Yep. Well, actually, we kind of forgot to touch on this other scene when you're talking about Clemens and Andrews talking. I thought it was actually kind of neat with their back and forth because they're discussing Ripley and what exactly happened and how Andrews is questioning Clemens, going, you're spending every moment you have with her, and he goes, I'm assuming it's not medical, and they get into what happened on LV-426, and he's telling her, like, yeah, she told me that she was with a military group and they came off of grief, and Andrews is trying to get more information on him, but Clemens ain't telling him everything. And so it kind of shows that he respects him, but yet he really doesn't respect him in a way, and that he knows that Andrews is basically going back and forth with the company, and he's not exactly completely 100% trustworthy with the whole situation. I've
read that Clemens doesn't really know all of it yet. I think he knows the bits and pieces that Ripley's fed him.
Yeah, but he knows more than what he's telling.
Yeah, he knows more than what he's telling them, but he still doesn't know the whole thing. But you're right, he's definitely holding stuff back from them.
And then when the scene happened with the alien, killing everybody else, they kind of added a little bit more into him about why they're going around those tunnels. We kind of questioned why are they going around just setting candles and just walking around in the dark places for no reason? And it turns out they're looking for stuff. They're looking for supplies, looking for any little thing they can use. They're looking for cigarettes too. I mean, they show Golic finding a cigarette machine. They have cigarette machines on the wall. I mean, it's supposed to be some type of alternate future because you're lucky if you can even find a pack of cigarettes these days. But
I know. Well, apparently Big Tobacco won in the alternate future, but no.
Weyland-Yutani was Marlboro.
Maybe they were. Who knows? But no, and I like the add-on though, that because I talked about last time how I hated the fact that the alien sneers at Golic or whatever, but his whole descent into crazy is much more fleshed out here. Like, he sees the thing as the second coming of the beast in Revelation. It's the end times, and they find him in the mess hall eating with blood still all over his face. And I'm like, wow, now I really buy this guy. Even if the whole ranting and raving didn't get it for me, that really got it for me. I like that. That extra footage and dialogue made a lot more sense.
Yep, and as soon as they find him, what do? They go get Dylan right away.
Exactly.
They show right there that he's the head honcho. They get Dylan, and then they get Aaron. Aaron's with them as well, but it just shows right there that something goes wrong, you got to go get Dylan. He's the one in charge. It's just adding the little tidbits onto Dylan.
Exactly, and then they're the ones that restrain him and get him in the hospital bed that's across from Ripley while she's working on Bishop and getting all the flight recorder info, and he starts ranting and raving more. But that makes a lot more sense. Dylan just didn't run into the sick bay and go, "What's wrong with my guy?" He had to restrain him and drag him in there, and that fleshes that out a lot better. It just makes more sense. The rest of it still plays the same. I mean, Clemens still gets killed. I think we get an extra shot of his skull getting crushed in by the alien mouth. I don't remember that from the theatrical cut. It seemed a little grosser and longer, but he pretty much gets taken out again. And I'll still say that I think that's a little early. I liked him and wish he could have hung around a little bit longer. But again, this movie is meant to shock me, and so it throws a wrench in the whole bit.
It plays a little bit different because Clemens and Ripley are actually talking to Golic as he's in a straitjacket on the bed across from him, and Golic's kind of going on, hey, nobody's perfect, we're only human, there's no such thing as a perfect human, in an insane world, a sane man will appear insane. He's just kind of giving all these weird, philosophy lessons to him, and that's when Clemens shuts the drape on him, because in the theatrical cut he just shuts the drape because he's going to give her an injection. It's like, okay, there's really no reason for him shutting the drape, but he did that to shut Golic up.
Yeah.
And then the next scene, though, you see is right after he does that is an added scene of the bed, underneath the bed, how the bed, you can see the alien as it comes down is on the bed next to Golic. And you can, it's a really eerie scene because you actually see the bed, the springs just kind of go down and you realize, oh crap, it's in there. And it's so silent except for those, you hear the bed, bed squeaking when it does it. It's just, I think it's really cool, little cool added one. A little cool added scene, and then you see Golic, kind of freaking out and stuff, and that's when it happens where he goes right into Clemens, bites his head off, and then right after he's killed, they do a close up of Golic, and he goes magnificent.
Yeah, he's enamored with the thing.
Yeah, he's doesn't know what this thing is, but he's starting to put together that this is
this is my calling. This thing is, it didn't kill me. It didn't kill me here. He's having some type of bond with it because, it's 2 times he's ran into it now and it didn't do anything to him.
And see, that's the thing that's I guess would have been, I could see, again, I'm going to put on my Fox studio exec hat. Well, why doesn't it kill him? Like, why would the alien care about the crazy guy?
I think because it was going after Ripley at this point. I mean, not Ripley. It was going after, well, I was going to say it was going after Clemens for going after being Ripley, kind of putting something in his arm. Maybe it's protecting her because of the Queen. But then why would it go after Ripley right after that and, put out its mouth and look at her? So it almost seems like that was the point where it discovered that Ripley was pregnant. So
yeah, maybe it sensed it when it got next to her or whatever. I mean, that's a good question because we don't know. I mean, you only in retrospect can you put that together as part of the story. So that's when you have to start wondering why it didn't go after her. I guess if it leaves both of them, but again, that in the theatrical cut, because we talked about how the alien felt like a slasher. Well, now it has an accomplice. Well, it's clearly Golling's problem because he's the one killing everybody. That's what it looks like the alien is trying to do after that. And we go ahead. The next bit is the more rumor control, and this is where Andrews gets killed, and then Ripley runs in on all that. But it starts off with, and I love this, Dylan leads another prayer, and then he starts yelling about all the BS that's going on. And they just start going at each other, and he's had enough. It's no, we're not gonna do this. We're not gonna act like this. And he's really trying to get him in line. And that's when Andrew steps up and starts his whole, this is what we know happened. This is not true. And then of course he gets taken into the roof.
Yeah, again, it almost goes back to the whole Foreman analogy where he's having a group meeting with his workers, and the boss is overlooking what he's saying, but it's what are you guys doing? Enough of this stuff. Start behaving the way you guys have been behaving just because, this woman came down. This is a test from God, and you guys are failing. Get your head out of your asses. It's time to man up and, be the men that you guys promised you guys were going to be, and, quit falling into these urges and letting, the devil take over. That's kind of what I got from Dylan. That's what he was telling him. He's just like,
exactly that, and that's exactly what he's telling. I think you're reading that exactly right, and that's the right character motivation for him. That makes a lot more sense. It actually makes it more earnest that you believe these guys really believe what they say they believe, and Dylan in particular has taken it on in a very special way to be their spiritual leader in a lot of ways, right? And I mean, I like that. It plays so much better in this version. Again, there's motivation for these characters. They're not just these nameless bald guys running around waiting to get killed by the alien.
Yep, definitely. It's adding all these little extra character beats that was missing in the theatrical cut.
Yeah, and there's a few more added pieces here and there, Nick, but for the most part, everything that's added back in is added in the middle. I think the chase scenes at the end are a little longer, or at least they felt a little longer, but they make a lot more sense too because they explain a lot more about how they're going to trap the alien, and that's the big thing, right? They actually trap the alien in the iron vat.
What we get was, we get this whole scene of them planning it where they're mopping the floors with the toxic waste that they're going to ignite. But you also get a couple little extra moments where, Dylan's right next to Ripley because Dylan's kind of keeping an eye on Ripley right now because of what happened and because of the alien being there. He's kind of seeing that she's kind of the alpha female and he's kind of, taking interest in her a little bit more. But he's sensing in her that something's up with her because he even mentions, he goes, you don't look all right. And you can kind of start sensing that, okay, something's going on here. Something's going on with Ripley. And then it plays out basically exactly the same except for after the explosion happens, one of the guys basically sacrifices himself where he says, come get me, and the alien chases after him, and they go into this big room with these 6 foot thick, steel doors, and then Dylan shuts it in there, and then you hear, of course, the guy getting ripped apart.
But again, that's that whole true devotion bit, the self-sacrifice. That actually is the setup for what Ripley decides to do at the end, and I'd like that so much better. Because now you've contained the thing, and what that does for the audience is now wait a minute, there's no way they can keep it contained, so how's it going to get out? That adds a layer of mystery. So it's not just running around in the dark waiting for it to kill you.
And also it adds more to the climax now because we've seen, it's not just also only these guys decide to sacrifice themselves in the end. You've seen that, they've kind of been on board the whole time that this thing needs to go.
Right.
It's killing their brothers, and they're willing to sacrifice themselves to save more of their brothers. Where at the theatrical cut, it's kind of like, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to trap it in there. Everybody dies. We're depressed. Okay, now we're just going to decide to kill ourselves to kill this thing. Where in the beginning of this, from this scene on, that you see that, these guys are going to, do what they need to do to kill it.
those two speeches that Ripley and Dylan give them at the end when they're doing the arm up, if you will, there's only a few of them left, and they decide, yeah, we're going down swinging, makes a lot more sense in the assembly cut than it does in the theatrical. You're right. In the theatrical, you just have to go with it and accept it as like a rah-rah speech. In this, they're all going, yeah, we know what's up. We got it. And they're much more on board with it. It's not a hard sell. It doesn't come off like a hard sell. It's more of a reminder of, well, this is what we've been saying we believed in all along. So now it's time to put it to the test. We've seen our brothers put it to the test. We're going to put it to the test. And I like it. It plays a lot better. And I like the fact that it's Galek who, in worshiping, he disappears in the theatrical cut. What the heck ever happens to him, we don't know. In this cut, he lets the thing out.
But even before that, though, we get kind of like in the beginning scene, the opening credits that me and you both love, with the kind of cutting back and forth, and then even with the dog and cremation cutting back and forth, we get another cutting back and forth scene that was cut out, and that's Dylan leading everybody in a prayer and them kind of intercutting it with them finding the bodies.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great scene, too. And they shows, Dylan's telling everybody they've moved up, they've gone to where they need to go and stuff, and kind of reinforcing that they sacrifice themselves for the greater good and they're going to be rewarded for it in, the next life.
Right, exactly. And it all plays so much better.
We get a little bit of more explanation on Aaron's character right after the alien is trapped, is where him and Ripley are kind of talking back and forth, where she's asking, Aaron, she's like, are you the religious type? Because they're Ripley's almost kind of mocking the religion in a way, kind of going, yeah, they're kind of crazy. And she asks him, she's like, are you a religious type? And he's like, no. He's like, I got a job. I can't be religious and stuff. And he's going on and more about, the rescue team's going to be here in 5 days. And they're going to open up that door and go in there with smart guns and kill it. And Ripley starts flipping out on him, going, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Because I think at this point they're still trying to figure out how to kill the alien. It's trapped, but they're trying to figure out how to kill it. But they don't get to that point because obviously Galek frees himself. He gets out, and then there's a guy keeping guard over the alien, and he ends up going there and cutting the guy's throat. And it's actually pretty gruesome what they show. They show him. They just cut the guy's throat, and he walks in, with his arms up like, I'm your savior, or you're my savior, let's meet and stuff. And the alien rips him apart. He gets his just dessert.
He gets his reward. Yeah, exactly. So, and then the rest of it plays out like the rest of the film plays out, with one notable exception. Bishop, when he shows up with the company at the end there, he is definitely human this time, right? Because when he gets hit in the head, he yells that whole line about how I'm not a droid at Ripley, and I liked that. Don't you? I mean, I thought that made a lot more sense now, like that he was a real person and not just another facsimile.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, droid or human, I mean, it still works the same way. I mean, if it's a droid, okay, they're trying to play with her. If it's a human, boy, they got to him quick,
Yeah.
The company sure picked them up quick, They're saying, we don't know how far away Fury 161 is from LV-426, but
I agree. There's still the plot hole of we don't know where the heck this is and how long they've been going. They never can fix that. But it plays better because you realize that he is indeed betraying her, but he is a human too. So he wasn't completely lying to her. And you get the feeling that, and I think Aaron has said it before, and they talk about the fact that, yes, there is surgery that can actually take this thing out of you. And you believe that more, that it's not just a story this time.
Mm-hmm.
But the end works different. How do you like it? Ripley, again, sacrifices herself, falls into the lead, but no chest burster this time.
I like it better, actually. I always thought that the chest burster in the end felt a little bit forced, kind of like it just so happened to come out at that time. I know you could spin it and say it obviously was sensing that it was going to die and tried to get out before it happened, but it always just seemed a little bit like, oh, it just happened in those 5 seconds that she, from when she fell to when she hit the fire.
Here's the funny thing to me. There's a line that gets dropped in this version that I don't remember from the theatrical, where she says, we got to hurry up, I ain't got a lot of time. Like, she can feel it moving or something, she says. And I'm like, you know what? I actually wanted it to come out again, because with it not coming out, you're left with this nugget of, well, did she really kill it? Did it really die? The other way, the theatrical way, which I admit the shot looks bad. There's no way to fix that unless they spend some real money fixing that effect, and they're not going to do that. But if they could fix that, I like it better because it's definitive that she somehow finds the strength to grab the thing and take it down into the lead with her.
Yeah, I mean, either way. I mean, I'm fine with either way. In the end, I kind of just like it that she fell in and the thing didn't burst out.
But you get it now, too, that not only have these guys made the sacrifice that they all had claimed to be a part of with their religion, but even though she makes fun of it, Ripley accepts it, too. That is the ultimate lesson, that at the end of everything, all you have is your willingness to give up your own needs and wants and survival for the better of everyone else. And that's the decision she comes to. And I think on this road, it makes a lot more sense. Nick, I think we're at the point of the podcast where we give our final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for Alien 3, The Assembly Cut?
I gave Alien 3, the theatrical version, a small popcorn. For the assembly cut, I'm going to give it a medium popcorn. Yeah, just the whole movie up to this point, just it adds up a lot more. And it just, the whole theme, I guess, just is a lot more enriching when you watch the assembly cut. And what I have to recommend, too, is, if you haven't seen Alien 3, don't just watch the assembly cut first. I think the assembly cut is better viewed after you watch the theatrical cut.
Agreed.
Because I think the initial shock of everything that happens in the first 15 minutes it really just kind of wears on you a little bit in the theatrical version, where you just get through the movie. I mean, it's one of those movies where you really have to work on getting through it. The theatrical, I mean, it's nice that it's kind of paced fast, but if you had to work on getting through the assembly cut, and it's like there's so much more character moments and it's just a longer movie, it's going to be a lot more heavier of a task. So I think it's always better just to watch the theatrical one first. Let that one kind of, soak up inside you for a little bit, accept what happens, then go back and watch the assembly cut, because I think you're going to appreciate it a lot more.
Well, here's the thing. I gave the last one a medium because I said even with all of its flaws, there's still performances there that carry it. I particularly think Charles S. Dutton and Sigourney Weaver make that film watchable and rewatchable in a lot of ways for all its flaws. But this one is so much better. And I agree with what you said, Nick. I think you need to see the theatrical, and then if you haven't seen it, then you watch the assembly. But for me personally, I didn't own a copy of the assembly cut before watching it for this podcast, but I do now, because I don't know that I'll watch the theatrical again. This one is so much more fulfilling an experience. And as an Alien fan, I really dig this one. And I'm glad I finally got around to seeing it and, had a reason to watch it. I'm going to give it a large. I for all the problems I have with the story, and there's still a couple holes in it, I got to take my hats off to Fincher for even being able to put this together off of what he had. This is a pretty coherent story, and I like it. I like the whole spiritual theme and undertones. It rings very true, and it makes a lot of sense. I dig it. So I'm going to give it a large popcorn for Alien 3, The Assembly Cut.
And actually, I got to point out, too, that actually it wasn't Fincher that put this together. It was actually Fox that put this together.
That's right.
The editors came back and did it because Fincher completely disowns this movie. He doesn't even want to talk about it. You bring it up, he'll probably punch you in the face. I mean,
Does he even talk about it on the Blu-rays? He doesn't on the quadrilogy, I know.
Another difference between the Blu-ray and then the quadrilogy is there is some more added behind-the-scenes stuff, and Fox gets brutally honest with stuff. And I was so surprised to hear what they said in the Blu-ray behind the scenes, and they basically they admit, we screwed up, we drove him off this project, and it's a mess, but Fincher did the best he could with. Fincher has done a lot of stuff with Fox after the fact, believe it or not. I mean, I believe Fight Club was done through Fox, and maybe a few other of his movies. So obviously they have a working relationship again, but it just kind of they basically, Fox admits that they're the reason why Fincher walked out, and they're the reason why Fincher will never even talk about this movie. He won't. I mean, good luck trying to find an interview with him about it, because according to him, this movie doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, he does divorce himself from it, and that's fine. Whatever. I'll say this. It makes me understand a little bit more of his next few pieces, particularly the next film he does, which is 7. Understanding what he was going for here. And maybe someday we'll get around to doing 7. That might be a good chance. But before we do that, Nick, we got some more Alien coming, man. We got Alien Resurrection. Now, at the time of recording and release of this podcast, the guy who wrote Alien Resurrection is responsible for a couple of big summer hits, Cabin in the Woods and this little thing called Avengers you might have heard of. And so we're talking about Joss Whedon, of course, who didn't direct but did write Alien Resurrection. And we get Ripley back somehow. We get a little Winona Ryder. I mean, it's going to be a different ride when we come back next time for the 4th Alien installment.
It's going to be an interesting one, just to say the least.
It has been a long time since I've watched Alien Resurrection, so I'm curious to revisit it and talk about it with you. Folks, again, we thank you for downloading this. Appreciate your support of our podcast here. You can find more episodes on our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. You can leave us a message on our guest book there. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and check us out. Let us know what you think of what we've said here. And you can find more episodes in our archive section. Also find links to our sister podcast, The Art of Slaying, where we review every episode of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer series. So until next time, for Nick, I'm Jay. Thanks for tuning in to Filmstrip.
Thanks for listening to Filmstrip and our reviews of the Alien movie franchise.
I still don't understand what you're dealing with, doing.
Visit our website, continuousplaypodcast.com, for more reviews and episodes.
I say we take off, nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
All content used or discussed in this podcast are the property of their respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504c2, Title 17.
This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo, signing off.